Hey, if you'd like to earn CEUs for this webinar, join the Safeopedia community at the link in the description below. Now, on to the show.
Thanks, Scott. And I feel like big shoes to fill, like leading the industrial transformation. If anyone's heard me talk about this, I'm extremely passionate about it. Scott, thank you for moderating the questions. And honestly, I'll pause at different times in the presentation because I get a lot out of the Q&A and hearing from people in the audience, different pain points or opinions. I welcome that so much because there's so much wonderful information to learn in this space. So a little bit about me. Scott did a really nice introduction about my background. I am a mechanical engineer. This is a photo of me with my crew in my recent role as a shift supervisor up in Fort McMurray, Alberta. I have a master's in change management and culture, and then I spent the last decade in Fort McMurray in various field adjacent positions. I was in maintenance. I worked lots of turnarounds. And then eventually I moved over into the operation as a shift supervisor with this wonderful crew of hardworking gentlemen on my crew. And then recently I've landed in this role of product owner and field enablement, connected worker space, really something that has only existed in the last 5 years or so. Just a role that connects our frontline workforce to our vendors and to our IT organization. So I like to start off my presentations with a story about why this program is so important to me. And so kind of like a safety moment, because this is Safeopedia. If you can all imagine yourself in Fort McMurray, Alberta, in the Canadian North, and it's a beautiful summer day in 2020. You are off shift as a shift supervisor. You're looking forward to like just a really relaxing night, but you get a phone call, and that phone call is someone that no one wants to get. I was told there was an explosion in my operating area and that there is a big fire and it's ongoing. And the first thing that I could think of is, well, I hope none of my workers are hurt. But immediately I grabbed all of my gear, grabbed a Red Bull, hopped in my car, and I was up north. I was one of the first supervisors on the scene to help with responding to this fire. And to just give context for how big it was about the size of like a baseball diamond, like it was large. And there were 8 operators, 2 supervisors, of which I was one of, and 5 firefighters fighting this fire. And we fought it for hours. We fought it through the night, and it was eventually extinguished 10 hours later. But during that time of fighting the fire, along with my crew, all we had were radios. And it's amazing that in 2020, we don't have more tools to equip ourselves to do a better job of these incidents. We were fighting the fire with a radio, and I was putting my workers into positions, into environments that we had no idea what we were dealing with. I remember doing constant calls over the radio to make sure that men were not down and that people were not incapacitated because we didn't know where people were. I also remember doing a tour every 20 minutes around the fire, helping my workers out, working with our fire department, and trying to keep inventory in my mind while I was walking around for that 20-minute tour. For when I would go back into the office, I would tell all the information that I could remember for those 20 minutes, get a bunch of information from my leaders that were in the incident command center about the interfaces for the operations, if they had turned off nitrogen, if we had certain utilities. And then I went back into the field and I did another 20-minute tour. Again, not super effective in terms of real-time communication. And there was one point when we were fighting the fire that there were flames encroaching on a tank. And I was trying to describe over the radio what I was seeing so that we could make a risk-based decision with engineers over the radio if we should evacuate the area because of a secondary explosion risk. That is not any type of environment anyone wants to put their people in. So like, thankfully, no one got seriously hurt. We were able to extinguish the fire. But when I talk about this program and like truly giving the right safety tools to people in our field, I am talking about the tools I wish I had when I was in the field. So this is extremely near and dear to my heart. Um, So like with that, like we're all safety leaders. We know that we need to work differently, and we know that technology is part of the solution. We can't keep doing the same thing we've been doing for the past like hundreds of years. It's time to actually implement technology. And I was a conventional worker in the field. I was disconnected. I only had a radio. Any information was notes that I had written on my glove, or they were out-of-date pieces of paper. But we need to work in this new connected worker way, where workers are empowered when they're connected real time to their crews. They feel like they're making better decisions. We are seeing really sophisticated troubleshooting because we have real-time connectivity with our crews at scale. And I just can't say enough about how Suncor has made a concerted investment in getting all of our frontline workers in hazardous locations their own intrinsically safe iPhone. And we have thousands in the field, like 8,000-9,000 of these intrinsically safe iPhones. And the response that we've had has been incredibly positive. Workers feel safer, they're happier, they're connected to their families, and they're doing really sophisticated troubleshooting and able to respond better to these kinds of incidents. And there was nothing better than going back to my crew 2 years after that fire incident and having them all connected with these devices. So I'm going to talk about this slide, and then Scott, if there's any good questions, I'm curious to hear what people have to say. So just as kind of a journey that Suncor has been on, we've been on this journey for several years, probably around 8 years. And the success of this journey has been built off the backs of, not always being right at the beginning. This slide is really just to talk about the fact that we knew that mobility was a really big carrot for us to pursue. And the initial approach that we had taken to digitalizing our frontline workforce was a center-led approach. We looked at what was available on the market at the time in terms of hardware for our workers in hazardous locations. And we just tried a bunch of things that we tried devices that we thought would be the most productive and the most effective from corporate. And just as an aside, like if anyone doesn't work in these hazardous locations, you can't bring just a regular Samsung Galaxy or iPhone from the Apple store with you into the field. You need the device to be certified for these hazardous locations because we have fugitive dusts and gases. And if the piece of electronic is not rated, it has the potential to cause a source of ignition and spark. So yeah, we looked at what was available at the time from the center. We tried lots of different form factors, different tablets, different phones, different computers in the field. We spent lots of money and time, and we didn't get the level of engagement that we were hoping for. So what would end up happening is that we would give a worker a brand new tablet. We'd have software on that tablet to do a checklist, and workers would go about their job, then have to stop and purposely log into that tablet, do the checklist, make management happy, sign out of the tablet, and then go back to their regular cadence of work. And it's just like, how is that effective? Like it's not. Like, we were not enabling our workforce with that philosophy. So we shifted our thinking, and we, instead of saying like what we think is best from the center, we connected with our front line. Similarly to the fact that I am a mechanical engineer, and I would never tell a pipe fitter what kind of pipe wrench they should use for their job. I should not also dictate what type of piece of electronic or how I should build software on their behalf without their input. So we flipped the script, and We looked around, like, what do you want to use? Like, what are you using in your personal life? And lo and behold, 80% of our operators were already using iPhones. Suncor had already operationalized iPhones for staffers. So why would we not just take what was working for us in the office and make it field-based and really, really heavily focused on that user experience? So Scott, I'm just gonna pause there. Are there any questions?
Yeah, we've got a few questions. One of them I think is a question we certainly see a lot, but it's how do you keep associates, people engaged using these tools?
You keep them engaged. So you keep them engaged by having them in your process when you're iterating on making it a product that's better. So even things like our iPhone deployment, like this is the first iPhone that we launched to our workers. We kept them engaged because they gave us feedback that this device, even though it's like 80% good, it still needs improvement. And you'll actually notice there's a 3M product stuck to the actual certified case on my phone that's coming off. It's all part of the testing, because they needed something for stop the drop. They needed a tether. So the way that we keep engagement is my team is heavily invested in those frontline end user relationships. For app building, we regularly go into the field and meet with workers to see that how they're using their apps or not using them, and then making them better.
Right. And you touched on it earlier, just obviously Suncor took a fairly progressive approach, to this initiative. A lot of safety folks are in smaller organizations, maybe, a little bit less technologically advanced. How did that process kind of evolve and emerge within Suncor, and what kind of takeaways could others, take back to their organization?
So even if you're smaller, I actually think that being bigger is not to our advantage right now. I think that you can be really nimble and you can do things, you can leapfrog over your competition quickly if you're smaller. My biggest point of feedback, Scott, would be to do something. To do something and to include your frontline workers as part of that something. Because I know that sometimes we get in our own ways. There may be roadblocks. We may be doing something really small. I recommend just trying something and then building off that and making it better. Because if you don't start, then you won't actually get to the product that you need. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, and I mean, you touched on it as part of the process of trying something, not being afraid to nix it if it didn't work, and continue to push forward. Because like you said, I think the cost of technology implementation has come way down, and it's okay to learn your lesson and improve from there. You're not necessarily, don't sign 100-year agreement with somebody. Do some trials, do some tests, do some pilot projects, and figure out what works best for your workers, right?
Absolutely, Scott. And like, yeah, let's not kid ourselves. Like the biggest risk for a lot of these technological projects is you go back to how it was. You go back to pen and paper. So again, like, and I always speak to this, I'm speaking to it more and more. My call to action for industry is, yeah, do the pilot, but have a plan to aggressively deploy it at scale. Like that's where you capture all the benefit from a safety and a value standpoint. And the risk is probably more if you don't have a plan, because the person that's leading that pilot is probably going to go away, and these projects kind of flutter and die when you don't have someone loving and coddling it. I I call everyone in industry to actually be more aggressive at scaling these projects. So
Yeah, that's great advice. And you might be getting to this, but Nick was asking, what's your thoughts on AI?
yes,
That's just that's just
I
a
will move
narrow,
on.
small
Nick,
question.
that thank you for priming me. because that's what this slide talks about. So in this whole journey, and we're still on this journey, we have a few key themes that have shaken out. I can't say enough that you need to include your end users in this process. Some of the individuals on this call, your end users might not be the same as my end users. You might have like warehouse workers versus technical people that I have in the field that are running some of the most expensive and dangerous equipment in the world. So you may need a different strategy, but include your workers in the strategy. Adopt this mindset of continuous iteration and ensure that you have the tools that everyone needs to be successful. So that's the first part I would like to talk about, and it does touch on AI. Because often we get ahead of ourselves, and AI sounds like very cool right now, and everyone's very excited. But when I talk to organizations who have AI as part of their 5-year business strategy, I ask them, well, what's your connectivity strategy? And it's like, well, we haven't really thought of that. It's like, well, that's step one. Like, this is foundational. You can't do any of this without proper connectivity. And I am very appreciative that my leaders have taken for years, like they've been very planful at ensuring we have PLTE at all of our refining sites. We invest in making sure that everyone has LTE on their phones. We pay for everyone's phone bill. Where it makes sense, we've deployed Starlink. And we continue to improve the connectivity at our operating sites because that's the investment that we have decided on as a company, that if these are devices that we're using and they're mission critical, then we need to have the Cadillac of connectivity. So that's step one on our journey to artificial intelligence. And step two, hardware. Like I strongly believe if you get the right hardware, that's before applications. Of course, you need to have workplace applications on your hardware. But aggressively deploy hardware that workers want to use. And for our group of individuals, that was an iPhone. And we've deployed, like I said, thousands of iPhones, and they're all having proper connectivity. Never underestimate the power of being able to take a photo or talk on Teams or iMessage. Like that is extremely powerful when you come from having nothing, especially when you're operating some very expensive and very dangerous equipment. And then 3, applications. We are currently on step 3 and step 4 and step 5 at Suncor. We've built some applications. It's public knowledge that we're an Enablon shop, we're an SAP shop, a Microsoft shop, and we continue to build and finesse these applications. We spend a lot of money on user interface to improve engagement with our applications because we have a long way to go. And for all of our processes, like permit to work, maintenance processes like inspections, turnarounds, we continue to digitalize and deploy at scale across Suncor. And with those applications, we have a data strategy. All of our data goes into one place. It all looks the same. It's clean. And then eventually, if you have steps 1 through 4 nailed, then you can talk about artificial intelligence scope. And if you're doing it right, and for some of our applications, we're already doing this. If you're doing artificial intelligence right, the end users shouldn't even really notice. They should just see that, hey, like this tool is easier to use. It can almost read my mind. It predicts like the next thing that I would have made as a decision as a leader. It's made my entry into SAP really clean. And that's what we're currently playing with right now at Suncor is that it's just overall improvements with AI. So
it's a good and kind of a good point to make on the hardware side, right? Because there's a lot of devices that are out on the market, and maybe not everybody realizes that there's a difference between the hardware itself and the platform that's running. And I mean, you've alluded to the iPhone, so obviously it's a commercial accessible hardware device, and then you're having to put specific software platforms on those devices. Can you talk a little bit about that in detail?
Like just how, like that strategy?
Yeah, maybe like going with a iPhone versus going with a manufactured device that's built, for that particular purpose.
Sure. I love this question. So we did. We initially took the approach of the manufacturer device intended for that purpose. Um, we strategically were looking to have one device that did it all. We were looking to consolidate our devices because our workers already have a lot of gear on them. And our strategy is to align such that everything is processed through the iPhone. So that decision was made for us such that we want to truly enable our workers. Our end users are highly skilled, like a labor force. Um, so it made little sense for them to just do one or two things with a device. Even things like radios, connected gas detection, all of it can be consolidated. And it should be, because that's the best user experience for our workers. I don't know if that kind of answers it, Scott.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great description of the thought process behind it, right? Because I do think in and I know this touches operations and more than just safety, but a lot of times, the safety person's going to get a pitch from a salesperson, and and it's going to sound like a great solution, but are you considering those other aspects, consolidating, like you said, and growing beyond maybe what that initial device can provide? So
Absolutely, absolutely. And to be strategic to one platform, like I said, we're a Microsoft shop, so everything goes to a Dataverse. Like everything is in Power BI. So really trying to consolidate and make it a seamless end user experience so that we can get the adoption we're looking for. Um, and I wanted to speak a little bit on that other side of this slide is we've had to do a lot of coaching and managing expectations in Suncor as we've been on this digitalization journey. A lot of times people think that our biggest barrier to these projects is our unionized workforce. Like 80% of our frontline workers at Suncor are union. But that has not really been the case. Like the frontline is hungry for change. They're doing so many jobs right now that they're looking for a way to do it more effectively and safely. And as long as you have a consistent message and it's truly in the spirit of keeping workers safer, and you're deploying consistently across your enterprise and the unions involved with that, like we've had no issue. They've actually been extremely welcome and happy to adopt the program. The more challenging hurdle has actually been just to change the way that we think as leaders at Suncor. We're all really used to traditional waterfall project management. We've all built refineries. We've built lots of stuff where we know how much concrete is required. And with that amount of concrete, you'll get this amount of output of megawatts or whatever you're building. And so we're used to that, like the known knowns of projects. So when we approach technology, we've had to coach our leaders that technology is never perfect. And that's because there are a lot of unknown unknowns. This is called agile. It's going to be constant iteration so that we can make these tools as effective as we possibly can. And in reality, there's always room for improvement. So that's been a really interesting journey for us. And I am delighted to say that our organization is fully aligned. We are thinking differently and we are welcoming this iteration, which is awesome. So yeah, just to really drive this home, tech-enabled workers are inspired to find new ways to make their jobs easier and safer. Like I said, if you give workers the right tools, they will find ways to work better that your team didn't think of. And that's really the sign of success is when your workers start innovating for you. And I love this example. We have some tailings operators in Fort McMurray. They work really large distances, and as part of their work, they have to sometimes manage like contractors and their own safety in electrical storms. Like we get lightning in the summer, like anywhere. And traditionally, the operators would wait for supervisors to go onto the radio to tell them, hey, there's an electrical storm, stand down. And then there was always confusion about like, is the electrical storm passed? Like, can I go back to work? Like, what's going on here? What the workers did is they were really sick of, not really knowing what was going on. And one of the first things they did when they got the iPhone is they went to the App Store and they downloaded a free out-of-the-box app called My Lightning Tracker. And now all of these team members and tailings, they manage their own lightning risk because they get real-time notifications to their persons. Like, that is not a use case that we even had on our radar.
Great. Yeah, that's a great example of empowering them to solve their own problems, right?
Yeah, and there's so many of these. And I think I think people like hearing about them. Like another example is there's a slow motion video feature on your phone. And I forget that I even have this because I'm not a photographer or anything. And one of our workers was doing regular operator rounds, and they noticed on their round that on one of our really large conveyors that there were sparks coming from the top of the conveyor. And typically what that means is like one of our conveyor wheels has like a crack in it. And usually, because we don't know the extent of the damage, we just slam the off button and the conveyor stops. But what this worker did is they went to the area with the sparking. They put on their slow motion camera so that they could watch the wheel turn in a way that you can't see with the naked eye. And we were able to see the extent of the damage of this indication on this wheel and make a much more planful judgment call to not stop immediately because it was something that was able to be managed more planfully. And like little things like that add up. Like, we're talking millions of dollars of saved production with that one incident where the operator just thought to use a slow motion camera. Like, really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, other ways of working, like we've digitalized our processes. Instead of having our permits on pen and paper, we now have real-time permit information. And what does that look like in practice? Well, this is actually information directly from one of our control room operators' logs. It was the middle of the night. There was a fire alarm. And normally when there's a fire alarm, there's a little bit of chaos in the operating plant. Operators will go back into the permit center and see if anyone's signed out, if there's anyone in the unit, are there any permits out? But because we had information real time and it was all digitalized instead of on pen and paper, all of the unit leader, the control room operator were able to confirm that there was actually no one in the unit when that alarm went off. And because of that, we were able to change our response to that fire alarm such that we were pretty sure it was a false positive, and we've de-risked the fact that there was no one in the area. And it took us only 19 minutes to clear that alarm when normally that would take at least twice as long, and you'd have to don the PPE and the SCBA. Yeah, like little things like this happen all the time, and it's just because we've enabled this mobility and this efficiency. And then this is like, it feels like a no-brainer, but like it's new for us in oil. Like, we had a fire as we do. You guys can see from this photo that fire indiscriminately burns all over. And the next steps after the fire is put out is you get to see what the affected area looks like, how much fire damage is there. And I love this use case because this was one of the first times we gave all of our maintenance workers one of these special phones. And all the phone had was FaceTime, like maybe some Microsoft apps like Outlook. But workers, they took it with them into the field, and we thought that we had a major repair on one of the exchangers in this affected area. And one of these workers was really smart. When they were doing a leak test in the field, which was we put water in the exchanger to see the extent of the damage, they FaceTimed the side of the exchanger so that our engineering department could see what the tube sheet looked like while we were filling this up with water. And in real time, we were able to take out 12 hours worth of additional welding scope because the tube sheet was not as affected as we thought it was originally. And like, that sounds like really simple stuff, but it makes a huge difference when you're working in environments like this to get back online half a day earlier, one shift earlier, just because we had a real-time video call to our subject matter experts. So
Yeah, it's not just good for letting the grandkids visit with grandma and grandpa, right? You can real world application.
exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, like give the workers tools that they want to use so they can be safer and more effective. The real-time data, ensuring that everything is in the cloud. Like it is truly a game changer. And I have had workers call our team directly. First of all, they get really, really angry if they're about to go into a role that's frontline and they don't have their phone, which is a good thing, because our workers see this as a tool that is absolutely imperative for working. It's as important as their radio, it's as important as their work boots. So we have that. And then additionally, they're calling us and they're saying thank you for giving us tools so that we can be connected not only to our crew and our families. I've been in the field, I've worked the life where I'd be waiting for coffee or for a break before I could check in on like my sick parent or whoever I was looking on. And your mind's not on task when you're worrying about your family member and you're not truly connected. So overall, it's been really good for quality of life and safety for our workers. And this is my last slide, Scott. And it's really, again, just a call to action. How do you know if you're on the right path when you are truly connecting your workforce? Well, your workers are going to embrace working differently with technology. Similar to how I said those tailings operators found a way to use the tech, make the tech work for them. Your workers are going to start working different. They're going to be engaged. We don't always, we a lot of times don't get positive feedback, but they are engaged and they are overall happy to use the products that we are giving them. The workforce is participating in processes and apps. They're happy to tell us how we can make our products better. Don't I know? And there's a measurable significant improvement to worker safety and efficiency due to the technology. Like I said, workers see this as a safety tool, and it's a must-have tool to get to work safely. So the way that we keep our team honest is, like, once an app goes live or a phone is turned on, like, that is not success. Like, success for us is really holding our feet to the fire and saying, how many unique users are actually clicking on that app and submitting forms? How much data is being used with that phone that we gave that individual? And it's important to be honest with yourselves so that you get the most return on your investment and the most engagement on your product. So